Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of our Lunchtime live sessions on the Graduate Ambitions podcast. I'm Lisa Brennan, and I am about to be joined by Anya of the Graduate Ambitions team. So we will be here to really go through some questions that we've been asked on interviews. So this is our kind of topic that we have picked for today, just based on the number of questions that we've been receiving. But in general, if you do come on and join us as we're live, if you've got any question about your job search or your transition from university to the workplace, then please feel free to input that into the message box at the bottom, and we can hopefully answer that. But in future, if you notice that we are going live and you're not able to join us, you can submit a question to us either through LinkedIn or through email to graduates@strategicambitions.com. But the easiest way to keep up to date with what's happening with the Graduate Ambitions podcasts are to subscribe so that you're getting all of the notifications. The podcast consists of these lunchtime live sessions, but also we do have other sessions in the series which include some guest speakers from employers. So you can go on and check out those that have already been uploaded onto the podcast site. And then, just look out for notifications of future employer sessions as well. So Anya, how are you doing today?
Good, thank you.
Good. We do have, as I said, quite a number of questions to get through today. So Anya, as always, is a person who collates the questions and keeps me in check. So I'll hand over to her and she can get us kicked off.
Yes, so I'm Anya. I work with Graduate Ambitions and have done for just over half a year now. Interviews and interview tips, something that can cause a lot of anxiety and nerves. And if you are feeling a little nervous, I hope this podcast can help a little with that. I think we should start with a question that we have been asked. And this one asks, I always worry so much about what I'm going to be asked that it really impacts my nerves and anxiety before interviews. Any tips to prevent this? What do you think about that one, Lisa?
Well, I think we always talk about preparation at Graduate Ambitions and how preparing ahead of any selection process, including interviews, is really the best thing that you can do to try and counteract those nerves. Now, I know, it's really hard because you are stepping into the unknown, really, and that's really what brings about that kind of anxiety and the fear. And it's something that happens for all of us. It doesn't matter what level someone's at or how much experience they've got. You still get nervous when you go for an interview, and I'm the same. I've been interviewing people for a long time. The best part of 30 years probably, for different jobs. But I still get nervous when it's me that's going, because it is something that's important to me. You do want to put yourself across in the best way. So I think when you're going for an interview, there's some key things that you can do. So one is really be aware of how long is this interview going to last. If it's like a really early stage interview in a process, it's maybe only going to last for half an hour. So during that time, you'll probably only get asked about 3 questions. So you can use that initially to think about, right, okay, I'll be doing an introduction about myself. I'll probably be asked what I know about the company. Then I'll be asked these 3 questions, and then there'll be an opportunity for me to ask questions to the company. So that's half an hour. It's gone. It's really quick. And then if your interview's longer, if it's a later stage interview and it's maybe 45 minutes to an hour, then again, you'll be meeting different people. It's unlikely it will be the same people that interview you at different stages. So again, there will be time for an introduction, understanding what you know about the company, and then at the end there will be time for you to ask questions. And generally, if it's a longer question, a longer interview time, sorry, then that introduction and kind of question part at the start and the end, they tend to be a bit longer. So in the middle, you might have 4 or 5 questions that you're going to be asked and be expected to give a bit more detail on in those longer interviews. So at least that kind of gives you an idea of the timeline and the framework that employers are working to. Then the next thing is to think about what those questions might be. So the 3 questions in the short interview or the 4 or 5 questions in the long interview, what might they be? And actually, sometimes they will tell you, sometimes they'll give you an information sheet about what the interview process is going to be like. And they might say our questions will centre around, and there might be 5 or 6 topics listed. And generally, there will be something on teamwork. Generally, there will be something on creativity. Generally, there will be something on how you support or help to lead other people in situations. Planning and organisation is another kind of common one. And then the final one might be just around general communication. So that's 5 topics kind of straight away that are really, really common for employers to ask. So you can think, based on the information on the job advert, what you've submitted in your application and on your CV, how do those things align together, and what examples have you put on your CV of the skills that you've got that are potentially in this 4 or 5 categories that they might ask you questions on. And then already you might have some ideas in your head of what those examples might look like. And if you're struggling to think about what type of questions they might ask, you can go onto our member hub. There are some example questions. And there's also some sample questions and answers as well. So you can have a look at how the company might be expecting you to answer. And then the third thing is just really to prepare yourself, So it is making sure you're not rushing before your interview takes place. And that's even when it's virtual as well. You don't want to be rushing about setting up, your tablet or your laptop or your phone to do the interview on. So make sure that you are giving yourself some time ahead to get yourself set up or travel to the venue and have a few minutes to just breathe and relax yourself before you start. And then just be yourself. Don't try to give answers that you think people are expecting. Be yourself. And that's the best way that you can kind of help to manage your nerves and anxiety. I think be prepared. Think about what kind of responses you can give. Prepare yourself and be yourself. They're the best bits of advice I can offer for that.
Yes, that really is sort of making yourself feel more prepared, I guess. And sort of how important is it to do your research about these companies before you walk into the interview?
Yeah, I mean, this is where it's really good to be able to demonstrate how you might fit with the organisation. And again, it's kind of expanding on the story that you might have put in your CV or your application that we spoke about on an earlier Lunchtime Live about CVs. When you're starting to tell that story in your CV about why you're passionate about working in a particular industry sector or a particular company and what drew you to the job, that's what can make you stand out from other candidates. So when you're in an interview and the employer asks you what do you know, it's great to be able to say, well, yeah, I know that you work in these sectors, or these are the types of clients you've got, or these are the services that you offer. You know, it's easy to go on the website and just regurgitate some of that. That's not really what they want. They want you to be able to, yeah, be aware, as I said, of the services and the sectors and so on, but also be aware of, well, what does that mean to you? How do you see yourself in that business? You know, saying, I've actually had a look, and you were working on this particular project, and actually that's something I'm really interested in, and that was one of the reasons that made me apply. Or, you've got these individuals in particular that work for your organisations, and these are people that I've been following for a couple of years on LinkedIn, and so knowing what work they do is making me more interested in working for you. So it's connecting you to what the business does as well that will help you to stand out. So yes, go on the websites, yes, go on their social media, understand what they're doing, what their kind of key policies and priorities are, but also think about how you connect yourself to that company and share that with them. And it's a really good way to start building on the story you've already told in your application.
Yeah. Yeah, and when I was doing my interviews, I always felt like the questions that they were asking always felt like it was a bit of trick questions, and I was always trying to manipulate my answers in a way to what they think, what I think that they want to hear. And I know that a lot of interviewers really don't like that because they can see that a mile off. Is that something that you can see a mile off as well?
Yeah, yeah, you really can, because you start to lose the detail of it, because it's something that it's not a situation that you've done, or you might have been part of it, but actually somebody else was doing the thing that you're describing. So as the interviewer starts to probe, you can kind of tell, right, they didn't actually do that, or they they've got an awareness, but yeah, perhaps they've not got as much experience in it as they're trying to put across. And it goes back to being yourself, and it's really hard actually when you're at early stages of your career, because you do want to impress, but sometimes you feel like your experience isn't worthy, or it's not good enough, or you should be able to do more. But at that stage in your career, the employer knows, right, this is you starting out, there is going to be a learning curve. um, they're not expecting you to come in and be able to do absolutely everything, or make decisions, or take on lots of responsibility. What they want you to do is come in and give your thoughts and your opinions and add value. And so being really honest about who you are and the experiences you've got gives you a better chance of being successful in an interview, than just thinking they'll want to hear that I've done loads of volunteering, and they'll want to hear that I've got relevant experience, and I've got part-time work experience, and I help in the community, and I've been studying, and so there's so many things that you could focus on, to try and make you sound like you're the best candidate, and that you can do absolutely everything. But it that will let you down if you start to think in that way. Be honest, be true to yourself, be true about your strengths, your interests, your passions, what drives you, because that's really what they want to hear. That's what they talk about when they talk about being authentic, being your full self and bringing your full self to work, not coming in and trying to be something you're not, because that's really hard to do. And making sure, yeah, that then you can fit with that organization, um, and be there because you want to be. So yeah, it's definitely important to be yourself rather than to try and tick someone else's boxes.
Yeah, yeah. So what is the best way to answer a question then? So to sort of be yourself and things like that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it is about being honest. When you think about it, it is what it's what any employer is looking for, as I said, in terms of when they talk about inclusivity, when they talk about diversity. They are not just talking about some of the different characteristics of us as human being, but they're talking about that diversity of thought, opinion, and how people think differently, and might want to take different approaches. So when you're answering your questions, it's really important that you can talk things through. If you're talking about a project, that was successful, mention, why you decided to do it in a particular way, what led to the decision, what your learning points are. Would you do it exactly the same way again, or would you change something? And it's okay to say, this is what I tried, it got me an okay grade, but actually in future I would have done it this way and I think it would have got me better results. Because companies are always learning from their experiences, and taking risks on certain things, and they want to know that you can do the same. They're not expecting this perfect molded graduate to walk in the door and just be, yeah, doing everything right every single day. um that's not real life, and it's not what they expect, and there's no such thing as a perfect mold of a graduate. So definitely be yourself, and as I said before, answer the questions truthfully. So really thinking about some examples ahead of time can really help you with that. And also, when you are answering honestly and being yourself, it takes some of the pressure and the anxiety off you, because you know who you are, you know what these experiences are, so you can go into detail, um, and you can share your thoughts and opinions on what you have done and why it's been important to you, or how you've developed from a certain situation. um, and these are the types of things that should be more like a conversation you're having with the interviewer, rather than it being a stilted, they ask a question, you respond, they want to know a bit more, you respond. So if it's more like a conversation, again, you can relax a bit more into it. So I think definitely that's my thoughts on how you would approach um, answering a question.
Yeah, I feel like if it's just a conversation and it sort of seems like it's just a conversation between two friends or whatever, I feel like both parties will be able to relax a bit and questions will flow easier, more easy, and answers will be easier. I feel like I would struggle a whole lot less if I felt that pressure being taken off.
Yeah, yeah. And don't forget, like, although the person who's interviewing you will be seeing more people than you, at the end of the day, they're just another person, and they've also
Mm.
been through an interview experience. So they want you to do well. They want you to do your best. They're not there to trick you. A bit like you said earlier on. You feel a bit like sometimes it's a trick question, or you're not sure how to answer. I mean, sometimes companies ask really bizarre questions like, what kind of animal would you want to be? Or, like, if you were in this situation, what would you do? And it's like quite subjective, so, but that's few and far between now. And sometimes certainly those questions can seem like a trick question, but the majority of companies now, they look for ways to ensure that the questions that they ask make sense to the actual person being interviewed, the candidate, and also to being, it makes sense to them, and it's something that they can say, well, this person provided, an answer that we would rate more highly than this one, because they have to be able to rate the responses. Um, so yeah, I would say that it's very few and far between you would get someone who's out to trick you. And if you do, I would also say that's probably not the type of company you want to work for anyway. So yeah, just trust that the person interviewing you wants you to do your best. Treat them just like you would treat any other person, and yeah, try to relax into it.
Yeah. And it's funny you mention the question about what sort of animal you'll be, because when I had an interview a couple of years ago, went dreadfully. They asked me that question, and I had no idea how to answer because it just surely was a trick question because there can't be a correct answer to that.
I
And
know,
it
yeah.
was really, really difficult because I had no idea what to say. I think I can't remember which animal I said, but I left the interview thinking, I have no idea how they took that.
Yeah.
Yeah, this next question is kind of interesting because it's very relevant with the current climate with COVID and things, and they're worried that they won't have that connection with the interviewer because the interview is virtual, and what can they do to help that? And I I understand how that might be tricky because social cues may be off, timings may be off, Wi-Fi issues. And what's some advice that you have for a virtual interview?
Yeah. I think these things are getting better. I think especially COVID has forced us all to become very familiar with being on video, and feel less, some people used to feel a bit embarrassed about putting their camera on because they didn't want to see themselves on screen, or you were worried about, sometimes there is that kind of few seconds lag, it's not completely, everything's not completely timing right, and you kind of worry you're talking over people, um but I think when it comes to things like that, when you've got that timing issue, and a lot of other things, it's about calling it out there and then. You can say, oh, we've got this time lag. Ask the interviewer, do you want? Would it be better if we signed off and signed back on again? You might get a better connection. Or just say, I'm really sorry, I don't mean to be talking over you, but I've got a bit of a time lag. Just so that they recognise that you understand this is the issue, and that you are referring to it. And it's not just your nerves that mean that you're speaking over them, kind of thing. So yeah, I would say that's one thing to think about. But when you are on screen, the easiest way to kind of build that rapport is still the same things. It's still by trying to make a connection, So when you are kind of coming on screen and, saying hello and, doing your introduction to yourself, it can be as it was, as if you were in person. When you're asking your questions, you can ask them questions, that relate to themselves and what you've seen them posting on perhaps LinkedIn, or papers they might have written, articles they might have written. You can, when you're just kind of logging on, if you're waiting on people to join, you can ask, how was your weekend? So don't be afraid to just treat that as if you were in the room with them, to kind of start building that rapport with them. And then also, it's treating the camera as if that is the person, so make sure you give the camera eye contact. And we've done a kind of short video tip on this before, where it's you just put a little bit of a post-it note or a bright bit of paper so that it draws your eye to the camera. So just put that underneath. Nobody else knows that's there, but it just helps you to keep focused on it, because when you've got people that are, perhaps two or three people on the other end of the screen, and you start to look at their kind of image on the screen rather than directly at the camera, it can just mean that it looks like you're looking everywhere but actually at the person. So that's another way. And the other thing is just to still use like your body language as you would, still use your hand gestures, if you talk with your hands, still use your tone of voice to indicate when, you are interested or you are asking a question. So all of these things you can still do by video. And even, if there are times where you can't put your video on, using your tone of voice becomes so much more important. So trying to make sure that you are demonstrating that you're listening and engaged through that tone of voice. And the same if it was a telephone interview, say at an earlier stage of the process. So these, just because it's virtual, you will still be able to make that connection. Just as I said, treat the screen and the lens as your audience, and talk to that, and really give them the eye contact, and the level of engagement that you need them to be able to see. So yeah, that's my kind of advice on that one.
Yeah. And what about different types of interviews? What's the difference between competency-based and evidence-based interviews?
Yeah, so people talk about this, that you're coming for this interview and it's going to be competency based, or it's going to be evidence based. Essentially, they're just kind of talking about the same thing. They want you to have situations where you can describe that you've been in that situation, that you can talk through how you acted or reacted, what you actually did during those situations. I mean, if it's a competency based question, it tends to be that these are linked very much to either core competencies or values of the business. So there will be specific keywords, which again will generally be mentioned in the job advert. And or on the website for that company, so you will have a good idea if a company says this is our company values, and there's generally between 3 and 5 kind of company values for a lot of companies, sometimes as many as 7. But so if they've got 5 values, essentially you'll probably get asked questions around about those values in your interview, because these are the behaviours that are really important to that organisation for you to demonstrate both to other colleagues and to customers. If it's evidence-based, again, it's probably a bit more general than, we've got these values, but it's probably more aligned to those 5 topics that I spoke about earlier on. Companies want to know you can communicate with different types of audiences. They want to know you'll support the wider team. They want to know that you can think of the best ways to do things, so being creative or innovative. They want to know you can plan and organise your own work and so on. So those topics that I mentioned earlier are kind of, again, things that they'll say, well, these are transferable skills that people can bring to any organisation. So what is your examples of that? There might be a point where they ask you some technical questions based on your studies. That you've done, and again, so that's just kind of talking through a project that you've done, and how you went about that. So I wouldn't get too worked up about, whether it's competency based or evidence based and what does that mean. I think it's, again, look at the company values, the words they're using in their job descriptions and so on, and that will give you a really big indication of the types of topics that they'll cover in the questions. And we also talk a lot in recruitment about how people answer the questions and the type of information that employers are looking for. And we generally talk about this STAR method. So it is, they want to understand what the situation was. They want to understand in that situation what was the particular task that you were involved in, and what were the actions that you took And then what were the results and what did you learn from that experience? How did it help you with your development? And again, as I mentioned earlier, are there things that you would do differently? And all of these things are fine to mention in an interview, as I said. But the other thing is that the person interviewing you knows that in real life you don't walk about talking in that kind of structured way. This is the situation. This is the task. This is the actions. This is the results. You'll start to talk about it, and you might say this is what we did, and actually this was the outcome of that, and to get that, this is what I did, and these are the decisions I made. So you might talk about that not in exactly that format, but these are the kind of the kind of 4 areas that they're looking to make sure that you've covered. But they'll be able to distinguish that from your response. So don't worry if you think, oh my goodness, that was a bit all over the place, or I went off on a bit of a tangent. They know things like this happen in interviews. They know people are nervous. So don't worry about that. And the other thing is, if you're asked a question, a lot of the times in an interview, people say things like, can you tell me about, a time when you've worked as part of a team? And they might then say, and can you tell us what you did? And can you tell us what the result was? Or, there might be kind of 3 parts to the question they ask you. Concentrate on the first part and then say, okay, so what was the additional thing that you wanted me to respond to there? What was the next part of that question? Don't feel that you've got to try and memorize it all in your head if they do ask it in 2 or 3 different parts at the one time. But actually, that's not a great interviewer technique. They should be asking you a question, waiting for you to respond, and then if they do need more information, they can then ask you at that point, rather than asking a big long question up front and you're like, my God, I'm nervous and I'm hardly taking this in. So don't be afraid to say, can you tell me the question again, or what was the second part, or sorry, I've kind of went off on a tangent there. What was the next part of it? Just call these things out. That's okay. You're only human.
Yes, yeah, only human. Sort of last question from me. Um, how important is it to prepare questions of your own? Because I know that at the end of every interview, they ask you if you have any questions. How important is that you've brought some with you? You sort of know what you're going to ask the company.
Yeah, it is important again to show a bit of your interest in why you want to work for the company. And it's not a one-sided thing. It's not about you just going into an interview and the person getting to choose you. That's not what it's about. It's about you being able to choose that organisation as well. An interview should be very much a two-sided process. It should be an opportunity for you to hear more about the information, the job, information on the company, information on the people that work there, and how they're enjoying working there. Um, and and that helps you to make a decision, especially if you're in a fortunate position where perhaps you get more than one offer. So you want to make sure that you've asked questions that really would help you make a decision in that eventuality, and make sure that that role's right for you. So think about what's important to you that organisation offers, um, and really what you want to know from them. So it could be wanting to understand more about the experience of the interviewers who are involved in the process, and asking them, why they work there, and what led them to being part of that organisation, right through to wanting to understand even some of the more practical aspects of, where you'll be based and what support you'll get, and also, what benefits might look like, and so on. But as I said, think about what's important to you, um, and don't think, you've got to ask just questions again that make you sound like, oh, this is something they would want to me to ask or expect me to ask at this level. This is your opportunity, as I say, to get more information that will help you make a decision on whether you want to work for this organisation. So I would say, before you go, have a list of, you know, 7 or 8 questions. Right now, you're never going to get to ask 7 or 8 questions, but you might find that in the discussions that you have with the different interviewers, that actually they answer some of your questions. So you still want to maybe have 2 or 3 questions that you would answer, ask them at the end, depending on how much time you've got. But again, it is an opportunity for you to connect in um, with the people that are interviewing you. So if you've checked them out on LinkedIn and say, I saw you're interested in this, and how did you get into that aspect of, your role with this company, so you can talk to them about that. You can ask them about, what made you write that particular article. Why is that important to this company? So again, you're connecting in with them, you're building that rapport, but it's helping you find out more about what is important to the company as well. So yeah, it's really important for many reasons, but definitely the most important one is that any question you ask helps you to make a decision about whether or not you would want to work with that organisation. So yeah, that's kind of, I would say, the best thing to think about when you're deciding what that list of questions would be.
Yeah, good. Yeah, I hope all this has been very helpful, actually.
Yeah, I know. I must say, I'm really quite enjoying doing these live sessions,
Yeah,
and so, um, yeah, if as I said, you subscribe, on whatever platform you happen to be listening to us on, because I know we're on the majority of the kind of standard podcast platforms, and we're on YouTube as well. So, yeah, like, subscribe, hit a bell, whatever it is that will get you the notifications of any future lunchtime lives and any future podcasts with employer guests. Then, yeah, we will start to advertise these a bit more in advance. But as I said earlier, you can definitely submit any question to us, ahead of time, or come on and ask it live, by typing it in the message box. And yeah, we can get you some personalised, tailored advice to you, as we go through these sessions. So yeah, we hope you all enjoy listening, and Anya and I will be back in a couple of weeks' time.
perfect. Thanks very much.
Okay,
Speak soon.
speak to you soon. Bye.